Right, you have your flower drawn, and this is the water-soluble oil pastels where you can use water to blend them. They're a little bit different looking and feeling than oil pastels, but this is what that box will look like. And then there's all these colors that you can use and mix together when you are working today. So what you'll want to do before you start is you will want a piece of scrap paper that you can practice mixing colors on, and you'll want to use your color wheel to decide what colors you are going to mix together onto your flower. And use what you know about the color wheel and what happens when you mix certain colors, knowing that warm colors mix well together and cool colors also mix well together. So on the scrap piece of paper, decide what you want the main color of your flower to be. And I'm going to start with blue. So with that, with these water-soluble oil pastels, you have two options. You can dip your pastel into water and get the end of it wet, and that will help kind of spread it out, and then it starts to look like watercolor paint. But notice once it starts to dry, that's what happens. Or you could take a small paintbrush, cover your paper with a little bit of water to start, and then go over that where you put the water with your pastel. So you can kind of play around with if you want to dip or if you want to use the paintbrush to add water to your paper first. So you're going to add your main color. So I want my color to be, of my flower to be mostly blue, and I'm going to choose the dipping method. So I'm going to dip it into there, and then choosing colors on my color wheel. So I'm going to add a purple to my blue to maybe make it darker. Again, just dipping it into the water and adding it to one side of my blue where I'm mixing those two colors together and seeing what happens. And then I also want to make my blue lighter, and I'm going to use white this time. You could use a yellow. It's totally up to you. So I'm overlapping and seeing what they look like when they mix together. And this is your practice. So you could practice mixing multiple colors together until you find what you really like. So I might just start with purple this time for my second practice. I dipped it into the water, so it's nice and wet. I'm going to see what it looks like when I just have the blue making my purple darker, and then the white on the other side. So I'm thinking I like purple as my main color instead of blue. And notice how that purple is pretty wet, so I didn't even have to dip my white into the water. But you want everything to be mixing and blending together. It shouldn't be dry or have like scratchy lines like that. It should all be very smooth like paint. Okay. So once you've practiced and found the colors that you want to mix together, you would take them onto the flower that you've drawn. And so I decided on purple. And I'm going to dip my purple into my water. Now, because I'm doing a bigger space, I think I like using the paintbrush method. So I'm going to cover a whole petal with my paintbrush, then grab my main color, and that's going to allow me to mix that and blend my colors. And you could kind of do both, where you dip and you use the paintbrush. So now I have my whole petal covered with that main color. And I'm going to use my darker color blue and start to mix that into the bottom. And it doesn't have to be like a straight line. You want it to kind of slowly change. Now I'm going to dip my blue into my water to kind of mix and blend my blue with my purple. And to make it look like it kind of has those veins that flowers have, you can kind of do like skinny lines and thicker lines to mix them together. Also then adding my white, I'm going to dip it into the water to make the end lighter. Where the sun might hit it, it might be just the way that the flower grows, it's lighter on the ends. And then I would go around and do that with every one. So I might start by getting it wet, adding my main color purple, and kind of doing the same method on every petal. And I'm kind of using both the paintbrush and dipping my pastels into the water to kind of make it look like a watercolor painting. And I could even go back with my purple and blend these even more together. So just kind of play around with the colors and how you blend them on each petal. Once you have finished filling in the petals and kind of playing around with pressure and how much water you are using, then you can go back and do outlines and like details. So I might use a little bit more pressure now that I've gone from dark to light and take my purple and outline my petals. And you won't use Sharpie, so you won't see that black line coming through. So you could go on outline, you could do like little detail lines, again to show veins on your petals like this, where it's a little bit less wet. Now I'm kind of taking my blue and outlining things. Again, just kind of playing with how hard you push and adding some details. So you could add details in the center like dots or something like that as well. If you wanted to, you could also add a background color like green, just playing around with adding water with your paintbrush and dipping your pastel into the water to fill in that space. You could even do shading with darker and lighter shades of green in the background, and just blending those colors and mixing them together to look like watercolor paints in your background. You could even add more veins or details to show leaves or other things to go along with your flower drawing.